Hello everyone, I'm Jack Fisher and welcome to my world. And today, I want to ask another difficult question, one I don't think gets asked enough, but has become increasingly relevant in recent years. And I want to explore it in the form of a thought experiment because it covers so many issues. From politics to economics to general social progress, from technology to daily interactions, it really is vast in scope, and it affects us more than we care to admit. It may sound overly dramatic, but I promise you, it's not. And it all comes down to a simple question. What is the limit of human competence? Now, I emphasized that last word for a reason, because it's a word that doesn't come up often enough in profound questions. We all like to dream and speculate on human capabilities, or even the extent of things like compassion, understanding, and insight. But competence, that thing we all want from friends, lovers, and fast food workers, that's a bit harder to consider. We've all known people who are just plain incompetent at certain tasks. I've been to restaurants where I've been served a cheeseburger without any cheese. I've dealt with people working at cash registers who take way too long to ring up a simple box of cereal and 2 cans of chili. But it's not entirely their fault. Some people just aren't good at certain things. And nobody is good at everything. Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback in the history of American football. But that doesn't mean he's the greatest tattoo artist as well. Everyone has their own sphere of competence. But even if you're good at something, you still have limits. Again, Tom Brady is the greatest quarterback of all time. But he lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning. Seriously, Eli Manning. But the scope of the question goes beyond any one person's limited mastery of a particular skill. Because when I say human competence, I'm not just referring to one person or even a group of people. I'm referring to humanity as a whole. And it's that bigger picture that I feel is a lot more relevant in our increasingly globalized society. And this is where attempting to answer that question becomes a thought experiment. Human beings are imperfect creatures. No matter your faith in humanity or lack thereof, most of us would agree. We are not wired for perfection. Even the most diligent, detail-oriented person in the world is going to make mistakes at some point. They may happen more often for some people more than others, but they will happen eventually. Over time, humanity's imperfections will manifest. This is why friends become enemies. It's why good marriages fail and bad marriages endure. It's why good leaders are deposed while bad leaders are freely elected. It's why ethical people can still be indirectly responsible for egregious misdeeds. The sheer breadth of humanity's imperfection is vast, but the fact we function as well as we do is also quite telling. Because it indicates that we can be competent on a large scale, large enough to allow for over 7 billion people to exist on this planet. We're also competent enough to make tools that allow us to fly, talk to other people on the other side of the planet, and build vast cities that literally reshape the land. That kind of competence is not trivial. But at the same time, it changes how competent we need to be in the grand scheme of things. Centuries ago, civilizations rose and fell all the time. Incompetent rulers came and went. Some were so grossly incompetent that it's almost hilarious, provided you ignore the suffering that incompetent rulers often bring to the people. But we as a species could get away with that. Because as inept as those rulers of the past were, they never had access to nuclear bombs or technology that could wipe out all life on Earth. A lot of that changed in the 20th century. Because as of this moment, there are a handful of people who could, either through malice or negligence, trigger a nuclear war that could render the entire planet uninhabitable for humans. And when the stakes are that high, a certain level of competence isn't just preferable, it's vital. Now, we haven't destroyed ourselves with nuclear weapons just yet, although we have come distressingly close a few times. You could even make the case that we're destroying ourselves now with burning fossil fuels. Because despite what skeptics and oil lobbyists may say, the climate is changing, and humanity, along with its energy-hungry technology, is the driving force behind it. Now, that technology may not destroy us with the same fury as a nuclear bomb, but it could still ultimately destroy us if we don't create better tools. But who's to say that's the last dangerous piece of technology we'll ever create? Right now, many people of varying levels of competence are working on artificial intelligence. Now, at the moment, it is not cause for concern. But some people are legitimately worried that we could create an intelligence that is so smart and so capable that we would not be able to control it. And at that point, what do? Are we facing a Skynet scenario? Or is it more akin to The Matrix? If you've seen those movies, you know it did not turn out well for humanity. But let's take a step back from sci-fi tropes for a moment. Instead, let's focus on how we manage things in the here and now within the real world. Even if you live in a part of the world with competent governments and functioning institutions, relatively speaking, there are still flaws. Millions of people still live in poverty. Millions still starve to death and lack access to basic needs like food, shelter, and sanitation. Overall, there's still plenty of room for improvement. And no matter how much you love your country, no matter how much patriotic zeal you carry, your world is still far from perfect. There are still plenty of refinements, reforms, and improvements to make at every level, from how leaders are elected to how trash is collected. It's a complex system full of many moving parts, as well as many imperfect people running it. And we humans can only do so much to manage it. Complexity, especially when people are involved, is not something our finite human brains can process effectively. We can still manage, but only to a point. Where that point is and how close we can get, well, that's a lot harder to answer. With the imperfections of the present in mind, let's try to look into the future, but not too far. Try to look ahead just long enough for a significant change to take hold. As more and more people are born and more issues emerge, the need to improve ourselves grows. As a civilization, we have to keep improving on some level, and if we don't, things just get messy and ugly and disastrous. Just ask the Romans or the Mayans. But that capability to continue improving the human condition for a greater number of people, does it ultimately have a ceiling? Does it get to a point where there's just too many complex systems for humanity to handle? Even with our most competent governments and our most competent people, is there a limit on just how effective they can all be? Because, like it or not, even good-natured human beings will falter every now and then. And greedy, corrupt people will find a way to exploit a system and do great harm to others just to benefit themselves. It's unavoidable, but even those people need a certain level of competence to keep civilization going. If there is a limit, then that'll affect everyone, regardless of their nature. We may not get to that limit of competence within our lifetime, but it's still worth contemplating, if only to appreciate the challenges that we face as a species. It may also highlight the need to rethink and reimagine how we improve ourselves in the future. Because if we as a species reach our level of competence, then how do we move forward? Do we try to enhance our biology to help mitigate some of our inherent imperfections? Or are we destined to stagnate and collapse? Or do we ultimately create a more competent successor to the human race in the form of machine intelligence? Again, there's no clear answer, but that's exactly why we should give it serious thought. And before I leave you to think about these questions yourself, let me add one more anecdote to the mix. Say, for instance, we found the perfect leaders for our society. They're as perfect as anyone can be. They're smart, capable, compassionate, understanding, and self-motivated. They always do right by the people. They trust us and we trust them. They do as much as possible to make society the best it can be. With all that in mind, does that society still have flaws? Even if it doesn't, there's still one inescapable issue. These rulers, as perfect as they might be, are still human. That means eventually they will die and someone will have to take their place. And if those successors are anything less than perfect, then that'll cause problems. Problems that will only compound as more imperfect rulers take over. What does this ultimately mean for that society? And what does it mean for us and our future? Don't misunderstand me. I have a lot of faith in humanity. I believe we are generally better than most people would admit with a straight face. But we are still an imperfect species full of imperfect individuals. And with imperfection comes limits. Knowing and appreciating those limits can only help us with the problems that lay before us. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on the limits of human competence? Let me know in the comments. And if you have any ideas for other thought experiments, please share them. Thanks for watching, everyone, and thanks for joining me in my world. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, take care and stay safe.